Welcome back to another Kerbal Space Program episode, and today we're going to be going to Minmus, and we're doing it Apollo style. Now, as you see here, I stacked two of these MK1 command pods on top of each other. If you have the DLC Making History, you have the Cosmonaut pod or the Gemini pod as well that you can use for this, which will make it a little bit easier to fly. That's totally up to you. We're trying to use we're trying not to use DLC parts. I do use the DLC fuel adapters here because I wasn't really thinking about it, but there is a construction in the construction tab. There is actually another adapter to go from 1.25 directly to 2.5, and you see to add an extra fuel tank below it. That choice is completely up to you. But if you have the Gemini pod unlocked, you also have the fuel tank adapters unlocked. This is more or less just to kind of give you a general idea of how to build this particular ship. In fact, this is a way overbuilt lander. The ship we used when we landed on the Mun the first time could actually do the Minmus mission as well if you don't want to do the orbital rendezvous. If you're not quite confident enough, I guess I'd say, into doing the orbital rendezvous. But if you wanted to practice, Minmus is a great place to practice because of how forgiving it can be. Now, you can do this mission a couple different ways. You don't have to use the 2.5 meter pieces like I am. They're just my personal favorite pieces, the 2.5 engines. So that's why we're using them in this video. As I said just a second ago, you can use the same rocket we used to go to the Mun. It will also do Minmus. There's enough delta V in it. Now, with this particular ascent, we're going to do a slight different than the rest of them. We're going to be pointing up a little bit harder just to get more into the atmosphere because the Poodle engine will actually be finalizing our circularization burn. As that skipper stage won't have enough fuel to actually get us to Minmus, and I don't want to leave space junk floating around. So we will be kind of tilting a little bit higher up and doing our horizontal speed burn a little bit later than we normally do. You do not have to do it this way. I was just trying to keep LKO a little bit cleaner. And again, the ship in general is overbuilt, but that Poodle stage has a lot of delta V in it, more than you actually need to do this mission. So we're going to kind of use it to do most of our horizontal speed burn just to kind of get us into LKO. That way the skipper and the main cell stage get blown up in the atmosphere and they're not just floating around. So again, with the launch, I've been kind of going through these launch ascents a little bit faster than the last few videos because we've gone over this a few times. If you haven't quite got the getting into orbit part down, I wouldn't recommend trying to go to Mun or Minmus. I'd practice getting into LKO first. The first video I do is actually getting into orbit the first time with very, very low-tech parts. So if you want to refer back to that video in case you're having any issues, I do go more into detail on that video. Now, getting to Minmus is a little different than getting to the Mun. Similar delta V requirements. It takes a little bit more to get that far away from Kerbin. But because of the tilt of Minmus, you want to do an adjustment burn halfway between Kerbin and Minmus. So just like we did in the Mun flyby video, I'm just gonna get a rough encounter with Minmus. I'm barely even in the sphere of influence. But we want to get just a rough encounter and then make the correction burn to get more equatorial for a circularization burn. That's the easiest way to do it. You can sit there and fight with a maneuver node maker and try to do the plane change in LKO, but you will burn up more fuel trying to do it. So I recommend, at least, especially if you're just getting kind of used to leaving Kerbin and going to other bodies, just get a very, very rough encounter, just to where you're actually in the sphere of influence of Minmus. And when I say in the sphere of influence, I mean to where you'll have the little marker around. It'll make that little ghost image of Minmus. You'll see it here in just a second. I kind of get it lined up here. But you'll notice that I'm really far above Minmus at the time. Once we do our correction burn, that will fix that. You see, we're predicted to be kind of far up above Minmus. So we're just going to go ahead and warp around and do our burn real fast. And then once we get our burn done, we're going to go ahead and warp out to we're about halfway between Minmus and from Kerbin, and we're going to do a correction burn. The reason for this is doing plane changes, especially just in general, plane changes can be very expensive to do. So that's why you want to do them in deep space, because it takes less delta V to burn in deep space, because you're not dealing with gravity and everything. I mean, we're still technically in Kerbin's sphere of influence, so it won't be a huge difference, but it will definitely save you fuel. See right here, I'm just kind of messing with the normal and anti-normal to kind of get our orbital predicted line to be about at the equatorial line of Minmus. You won't always get this perfect, but you want to try to get it as close as possible because when you're doing Apollo style missions, it's easier to re-dock and rendezvous with the main ship if you're at an equatorial orbit. Now you'll actually see that we don't get it quite perfect, and it's super easy for me to fix that because again, Minmus's surface gravity is super forgiving. But once we get here, we're going to go ahead and get ready to do a retrograde burn. Now, you may have noticed I was a little happy with Time Warp, and I didn't grab the scientific data from high above Minmus. This is how you fix that. We're going to make an eccentric orbit around Minmus just for a second. That way we can do both low and high above Minmus experiments because they're two different biome, quote unquote, or two different sections. So you get different sets of data from each one of those. So I would recommend that you do go ahead and do the data from close to Minmus and then go ahead and do all the experiments high above Minmus, which is why we brought Bob in the first place, so we can reset the Science Boy Jr. and the Mystery Goo. We will, however, have Jeb be doing the landing because we don't have good enough antennas or relay dishes to where we can make maneuver nodes and keep Bob in contact with the KSC. If you are not playing with ComNet or not playing with Kerbal Experience, you don't have to do it the way I'm doing it, but again, we're just playing this back at normal difficulty. So I'm just going to rotate up to the high point of the orbit, get all this data real fast, have Bob bring it all back to the main ship, reset everything, and then we're going to go ahead and come back down to periapsis and do a small burn to circularize, and we're going to have Jeb hop in the lander and have Jeb do the actual descent down to Minmus. I would recommend using quick saves around this point, just in case, especially if you're fairly new with the EVA packs. You'll actually see it happens here in a little bit, but sometimes the kerbals will bounce off the command pods and go like flying away from the ship. And sometimes they fly kind of far away and it's hard to get back to the ship, especially if you're new to using the EVA packs. I'm not sure if it's just panic or what, but you end up not being able to get back to it, and then your Kerbal's just stuck floating in space, and that's just it. You have to revert the mission. But if you quick save, you can just do a quick load and then go ahead and try again. I know a lot of people don't think quick saving is very realistic, but when learning the game, I would recommend doing that, or you're going to be buying a lot of Kerbals because a lot of them are going to be left in space or they're going to die. Just It's just a recommendation I'd make, especially to new players. Now I'm going to go ahead and make a quick maneuver node so I can go ahead and get a predicted line to the Minmus Flats, which is where I'd recommend landing for the first time because it's the easiest place on Minmus to land. As you see, I kind of put the predicted line a little bit farther ahead of the flats, almost actually into the mountains, because just like the Mun, when we bleed off all of our our horizontal speed, um, our predicted line will actually be where we're going to land. So you want to kind of overshoot whatever target you have set for yourself where you want to land. Overshoot it a little bit because by the time you actually bleed off the horizontal speed to come down to land, you won't be anywhere near where the predicted path was. So just do yourself a favor and make sure to kind of initially overshoot. That way when you actually make the landing, you're not landing on the mountain sideways somewhere and rolling your ship around. But we're just going to kind of go ahead and start bleeding off all of our horizontal speed so we can go ahead and make a nice landing onto the surface of Minmus and the flats. Now, Minmus is, I think, one of the most beautiful planets in the game. I like the colors and everything, and it's a really good place for beginners to practice because of how forgiving it can be. So just like with the Mun, we're just going to kind of keep our speed, under 30, between 20 and 30, and just slowly bleed off speed. And then once we get to about 100 to 50 meters above the surface, we're just going to very, very lightly throttle and then do a quick puff at the end and make a nice soft landing. I actually landed a little bit harder because I wanted to demonstrate how forgiving the surface actually was. But now we're here, we're just going to go ahead and run over all of our experiments, hop out, do the EVA report, grab our surface sample, and plant the flag. If you're noticing all my experiments are just kind of going off, it's because since we upgraded the VAB to the second stage, we can use quick action groups, which on console, I believe if you just hit the right on the D-pad, it will open up the little quick save wheel, and then on PC, it's just the number key is 1 to 0. You can kind of bind all the experiments to a random key. I always do mine on 5 just because it's a preference, and then just hit the button and then it will just run all of the experiments for you. You can also do this to toggle, the solar panels and other things and the ladders and whatnot. Just keep in mind that you do have access to those after you do the first upgrade on the VAB. You do get a little bit better access once you get it to the final stage, but we're not quite there yet. And you see here, I'm just going to kind of go ahead and set the mothership as a target and wait for it to get just about above me. And then I'm going to start burning towards the 90-degree mark just to get up into orbit. I want to match the top of my orbit with the orbital line of the main ship. And then I'm just going to make a quick maneuver node and try to get as close as I can to the target. Once again, if you are struggling with doing this, then I would refer back to the video prior to this where I go over orbital rendezvous and LKO. If you can confidently do an orbital rendezvous and LKO, you can easily do one on Minmus because it's a lot easier to do it around Minmus. We're just going to go ahead and just do the little, bird retrograde to the target and towards the target trick a couple of times, get nice and lined up with the mothership, and we're going to go ahead and attempt to redock. Now, I'm not sure if you guys have seen it yet, but the antenna sticks out of the docking port a little bit, and it makes it to where we can't dock, but because it's magnetized, it actually allows me to hold the ships together close enough to where I don't have to actually fully dock to get Jeb safely back to the main ship. The downside of this is I wasn't able to properly deorbit my lander, but I went back in the tracking station and just deleted it manually. If you go to the tracking station and click on whatever ship or debris you're looking at, you have the option to fly it, recover it, or destroy it. If it's not in a recoverable section, you can either fly it or destroy it. If you just hit the destroy part, it'll just blow the stuff up, so you won't have to worry about it, floating around in space. But now that we're back to the main ship, I'm going to go ahead and EVA with Jeb and grab all of the data from the capsule and go ahead and make sure I bring it with me just so I can recover all of the scientific data. You don't want to forget to do this, because if you do forget to do this, then you just can't get that data back. As you see, I'm trying to see if I can get it to wobble out and try and deorbit it. Unfortunately, I was not able to. So I deleted it in the tracking station. But as you see right there, I kind of just lightly tapped the command pod and it sent Jeb kind of tumbling away from the ship. That was what I was talking about when referring to using the quick save before leaving the ship, because that sometimes does happen and you can't always get back. So now that we have everyone back in the main ship and have all of our scientific data, we're just going to go ahead and make a maneuver node that will have us burning the opposite direction of the orbit that Minmus is currently going around Kerbin, just like we do on the Mun, basically burn backwards. That way we're burning towards Kerbin. An easy way to do this is drag your prograde marker out towards about 190-ish and then just kind of move it around a bit until you get really close to where you want to be. Again, we're going to aim for about 30 to 35 kilometers at our periapsis around Kerbin, so we can use the atmosphere to go ahead and slow our capsule down enough to where it can land. You see I just make a little bit of adjustments here, and you'll also notice how the orbit's kind of tilting like up to where you're coming in at a polar angle. That's pretty normal with Minmus depending on where you're at when you're coming back. So don't worry about that. As long as it's still, that fine oval shape, that's the most efficient way you can do it, is once it's in that oval shape. But you're going to notice here, I'm going to actually stop my burn close to the end of this and then just change my throttle. I'm going to turn my throttle down really low and just lightly burn until I'm exactly where I want to. It's a lot easier to fly this manually instead of just trying to rely on just the maneuver node maker, because as I said several times before, it's not the most accurate in stock KSP. My camera was having an issue for some reason. It wouldn't let me just jump back to our ship, so I fix it here in a second, but that's why you see me going in and out of the map screen a bunch. I'm also just grabbing an EVA report from high above Minmus, since I forgot to do that when we first came in. I just want to get that little extra data. We're just going to go ahead and warp until we're pretty much at Kerbin's 70k orbital line. If you just time warp really fast, it'll automatically stop you here because you can't go that fast as close to the surface. And then we're just going to kick off the rest of our poodle stage, and then just let gravity and the atmosphere take care of the rest. As you see here, that temp meter keeps kind of popping in and out. This is played back at ×4 speed as I'm using ×4 time warp. So this playback's a lot faster than what it's actually going to be. This part takes a little bit of time. But because of the way the ships are stacked, it's a little bit off. So just kind of tap your left and right key on either the controller or the keyboard just back and forth a little bit when those temp gauges pop up, and it'll take care of that problem. But we're now at the surface. We got 1,007 science points from that trip, which is awesome. And we're going to go ahead and unlock a few things. But before we get to that, I just want to thank you guys again for watching my video. Go ahead and like and subscribe for more if you want to. It's totally up to you. But now that we got that out of the way, let's go ahead and pop over here real quick, and we're going to unlock a few different things. Now, one of the things I want is this command pod right here, because it's a 3-seater command pod. We also want to get the better solar panels, which is the bottom next tab on the electronics tree. And we're going to grab this construction tab here because of the 2.5 fairing unit, which will make the rest of our shipbuilding a lot easier. Now, we do not quite have enough to get everything I wanted, because I wanted to get ladders and everything as well before doing DUNA and this relay dish, which is very important for the DUNA trip. So I'm just going to unlock these space exploration tabs, unlock the relay dish, and I'm actually going to grab the and this is in the third tree, the airplane thing, and that's because of the MK1 fuselage, I believe is how you say it, because we're going to need that for the nuclear stage. Now we're going to have to unlock one more of the fuel tabs before we can unlock the nuclear propulsion, unfortunately, which if you add it up, it's 300 for the nuclear propulsion and 160 for that fuel tab. So we will need to get at least that much more science before we can make an easy DUNA trip. It is technically possible with the parts we have now, but I'm going to kind of show you guys how to build a really good interplanetary ship that you can use to get to any other body in the kerbal system. So that's pretty much going to wrap the video up. Again, I just want to say thank you guys again for watching. I hope you guys at least learned something. If you have any other questions or things I can do better, go ahead and let me know in the comments. And I will hopefully see you guys next time.